What if everything you thought you knew about justice was wrong? What if the universe keeps a perfect ledger of every wrong, every betrayal, every act of cruelty, and waits decades to collect the debt? This is the story of Robert Hayes, a homeless veteran who spent 3 years being invisible under a Detroit overpass. Every morning, the same silver Mercedes would speed past, and every morning, the same wealthy man would throw his coffee at Robert, calling him worthless trash. But Robert wasn't worthless. He was a key player in a 55-year-old conspiracy that would bring down an empire built on blood and betrayal. It started with a mysterious letter from a dead man. A letter that had been waiting over half a century to find its way into the right hands. A letter that contained secrets powerful enough to destroy one of Detroit's wealthiest families and transform a broken homeless veteran into an agent of divine justice. The woman who delivered this letter had been searching for Robert for decades, carrying a burden that her dying husband placed on her shoulders in 1968. She knew things about Robert's past that even he had forgotten. Things about a place where 11 soldiers died and 1 man lived to carry the guilt. But guilt was never what Robert was supposed to carry. The truth was something far more devastating, far more shocking than anyone could imagine. By the time this story ends, a millionaire will be sleeping in homeless shelters while a homeless man runs a $50 million empire. A son will pay for his father's sins in ways that will leave you speechless. And you'll discover that sometimes the most perfect revenge is showing your enemy mercy they never deserved. This isn't just a story about karma. It's about justice that transcends generations, secrets that refuse to stay buried, and the moment when a ghost from the past returns to balance the scales of fate. The rain hammers down on the concrete like bullets, and beneath the shadows of Highway 94, a ghost of a man sits with his back against the cold pillar. Robert Hayes clutches a piece of cardboard that reads "Homeless Veteran." Anything helps, God bless, but the ink is bleeding away just like everything else in his life. 62 years old. 3 years on these streets. Every morning he wakes up wondering if today will be the day. He just gives up completely. But this isn't just another sob story about homelessness. This is about justice that travels through decades, karma that never forgets, and a letter that will turn everything upside down. Robert adjusts his torn military jacket, the one piece of his past he refuses to let go. The fabric is threadbare, stained with years of survival, but those sergeant stripes still show through the grime. Vietnam took everything from him, his youth, his peace of mind, his ability to trust. The streets took the rest. Cars speed past, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Most drivers don't even glance his way. He's invisible, just another piece of urban decay they pretend doesn't exist. But there's one car that passes by every single day, same time, same route. A silver Mercedes. License plate reading Miller 1. Vincent Miller grips his steering wheel tighter every time he sees that pathetic figure under the overpass. 45 years old, self-made millionaire, owner of Miller Development Corporation. He built his empire from nothing, or so he tells everyone. Miller Development has torn down half the city's old buildings, replacing history with profit margins. Vincent rolls down his window as he approaches the overpass. Robert looks up hopefully, thinking maybe today someone will show kindness. Instead, Vincent hurls his half-empty coffee cup directly at Robert's chest. "Get a job, you worthless piece of trash." The hot coffee soaks through Robert's jacket, burning his skin. Vincent speeds away, laughing at his rearview mirror. This has become a sick ritual for him, a daily reminder of his superiority over the dregs of society. Robert wipes the coffee from his jacket with shaking hands. The burn stings, but not as much as the humiliation. He's been spit on, kicked, robbed, and beaten during his time on the streets, but something about Vincent Miller's cruelty cuts deeper. There's a personal hatred in those eyes that Robert can't understand. 3 blocks away, in a modest apartment above an antique bookstore, Dorothy Williams sits by her window watching the rain. 78 years old, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, hands weathered by decades of waiting. She's been watching, searching, praying for the right moment for over 50 years. On her kitchen table sits an envelope, yellow with age, sealed with red wax. The letter inside was written by her husband James on his deathbed in 1968, just 2 months after returning from Vietnam. His final words to her were simple but haunting. "Find Robert Hayes. Give him the letter when the time is right. You'll know when." Dorothy has carried this burden for 55 years. She hired private investigators, searched military records, followed dead-end leads across the country. Robert Hayes was listed as missing in action, presumed dead. No family claimed his body. No one came looking for him. But 3 months ago, everything changed. Dorothy was walking past the overpass when she heard a man arguing with a social worker. The social worker was trying to convince him to go to a shelter, and he kept saying his name. Robert Hayes, Sergeant Robert Hayes, 1st Infantry Division, Vietnam. Dorothy nearly collapsed right there on the sidewalk. After all these years, all that searching, he was right here in her city, living like a ghost under a bridge. She's been watching him ever since, studying his character, waiting for divine confirmation that this broken man is the same soldier her husband described in his dying words. Tonight feels different. The storm is fierce, angrier than usual. Dorothy picks up the letter and holds it against her chest. She can almost hear James whispering to her. It's time. She puts on her raincoat and walks into the storm. Robert is trying to build a small fire with scraps of paper and cardboard when he sees her approaching. An elderly woman, walking purposefully through the rain like she's on a mission from God. Most people cross the street to avoid him, but she's walking straight toward his makeshift shelter. Robert Hayes. Her voice cuts through the sound of rain and traffic. Robert looks up, startled. Nobody uses his name anymore. He's been invisible for so long that hearing his own name feels like hearing a ghost. How do you know my name? Dorothy stops 3 feet away from him, studying his face in the dim light. Even through the grime and the years of hardship, she can see the young soldier from the photograph James showed her decades ago. The same eyes, older now and filled with pain, but unmistakably the same man. My husband told me about you. Lady, I think you got the wrong person. I don't know your husband. Dorothy reaches into her coat and pulls out the envelope. Even in the rain, Robert can see how old it is, how carefully it's been preserved. The red wax seal gleams like a drop of blood in the streetlight. James Williams. Captain James Williams. He served with you in Vietnam. Robert's entire body goes rigid. James Williams. The name hits him like a physical blow, dragging up memories he spent decades trying to bury. Captain Williams saved his life more times than he could count. A good man, a brave officer who actually cared about his soldiers. Captain he's dead. Died in '68, right after we got back. Yes. And before he died, he gave me this letter. He made me promise to find you and give it to you when the time was right. Dorothy extends the envelope toward Robert. Her hands are shaking, but not from the cold. He said you'd understand when you read it. He said it would explain everything. Robert stares at the letter like it might bite him. After all these years of having nothing, no connections to his past, no proof that his service meant anything to anyone, here's a message from beyond the grave. Why now? Why after all this time? Dorothy's eyes fill with tears. Because James knew this day would come. He knew you'd need this letter when justice was finally possible. Robert takes the envelope with trembling hands. The paper feels substantial, important, like it contains the weight of history. The red wax seal bears the impression of military insignia. What's in it? The truth. The truth about what really happened over there. The truth about why you've suffered all these years while others prospered from your pain. A car speeds past, headlights illuminating both of them for a brief moment. Robert clutches the letter to his chest, protecting it from the rain. My husband spent his last months gathering evidence, documenting everything. He died knowing that someday, somehow, justice would find its way to you. Dorothy steps back into the shadows. Read it when you're ready, Robert. But know this, your suffering is about to end. And someone else's reckoning is about to begin. Before Robert can ask another question, Dorothy disappears into the storm, leaving him alone under the overpass with a letter that will change everything. Robert stares at the envelope in his hands. 55 years. Captain Williams has been dead for 55 years, and somehow he's still looking out for his soldiers. The rain continues to fall, but Robert doesn't feel it anymore. All he can feel is the weight of destiny in his hands, and the strange certainty that his life is about to take a turn he never saw coming. Tomorrow, he'll open the letter and discover that some debts can never be erased, some crimes can never be hidden, and some justice is worth waiting a lifetime to deliver. The morning sun cuts through the clouds like a blade, and Robert Hayes sits on the edge of his cardboard bed, staring at the envelope that's been burning a hole in his mind all night. The red wax seal catches the light, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. He's been a ghost for 3 years, invisible to the world, but this letter makes him feel alive again. His hands shake as he breaks the seal. The wax crumbles like dried blood, and inside, he finds 3 pages of handwriting in fading blue ink. The paper smells like old books and forgotten promises. At the top, in Captain William's careful script, for Sergeant Robert Hayes, the truth about Firebase Charlie. Firebase Charlie. The name hits Robert like a sledgehammer to the chest. He hasn't thought about that godforsaken outpost in decades, but suddenly he's 22 years old again, crouched in a muddy foxhole, listening to mortars whistle overhead. The letter begins. Robert, if you're reading this, then God has finally answered my prayers and Dorothy found you. I'm dying, son, and I can't take this secret to my grave. What happened at Firebase Charlie wasn't your fault. What happened to our boys wasn't combat. It was murder by cowardice, and the man responsible has been living like a king while you've been carrying the guilt. Robert's vision blurs. Firebase Charlie was supposed to be a routine patrol base, nothing more than a temporary outpost to monitor enemy movement. 12 men stationed there for what should have been a quiet 2-week rotation. Instead, it became a nightmare that still haunts Robert's dreams. The letter continues. You need to know about Lieutenant Charles Miller. I know you remember him, the officer who was supposed to be our backup, the one who never came when we called for help. But it's worse than you know, Robert. So much worse. Charles Miller. Robert remembers him clearly now, a cocky 24-year-old from some wealthy Detroit family. The kind of officer who treated war like a game and soldiers like chess pieces. Miller was stationed at Fire Support Base Alpha, 3 miles south of Charlie, with orders to provide immediate backup if Charlie came under attack. When the North Vietnamese hit Firebase Charlie at dawn on March 15th, Robert and his 11 brothers were outnumbered 20-1. They held their position for 6 hours, calling desperately for backup, for air support, for anything. Lieutenant Miller's voice crackled over the radio. Hold tight, Charlie. Help is coming. Help never came. Robert reads on, his hands trembling so hard he can barely hold the pages. I was at headquarters when the calls came in. I heard Miller's reports, Robert. He told command that Firebase Charlie had been overrun, that all hands were lost, that there was no point in sending backup because everyone was already dead. He abandoned you while you were still fighting. He left you to die so he wouldn't have to risk his own precious neck. The words on the page blur as tears fall onto the ink. Robert remembers that final radio call, his own voice hoarse from screaming orders and breathing smoke. Alpha Base, this is Charlie. We're still here. We're still fighting. Where the hell is our backup? Miller's response was cold as winter. Charlie Base, you're breaking up. I'm showing you as overrun. Good luck, boys. Then silence. Robert was the only survivor. Captured during the final assault, tortured for 3 months in a prison camp that officially didn't exist. When he finally escaped and made it back to American lines, he learned that the other 11 men had been listed as killed in action. There was no investigation, no questions asked. The war was winding down, and one more tragedy was just paperwork. But Captain Williams knew the truth. The letter reveals everything. I spent my last weeks gathering evidence, Robert. Military communication logs, witness statements, financial records. Miller didn't just abandon you. He was being paid by war profiteers to ensure certain operations failed. Your boys died because Miller sold you out for money. Robert's hands are shaking so hard he can barely read the next paragraph. Miller stole the emergency fund, $50,000 meant for the families of fallen soldiers. Money that should have gone to the widows and children of your brothers. He used that blood money to start his real estate business when he got back to Detroit. The world spins around Robert like he's falling through space. Miller. Vincent Miller. The same Miller who throws coffee at him every morning, who calls him worthless trash, who speeds past in his silver Mercedes built on the bones of dead soldiers. Vincent Miller is the son of Lieutenant Charles Miller. The letter continues with devastating precision. I tracked Charles Miller after the war. He changed his name from Charles to Vincent, started Miller Development Corporation with stolen military funds. He's lived like a king for 50 years while the families of your brothers struggled in poverty. While you carried the guilt of being the only survivor. Robert's entire body is shaking now. Every morning for 3 years, the son of his betrayer has driven past him, mocking him, degrading him, never knowing that his father's cowardice created the broken man under the bridge. But there's more. Captain Williams' final revelation is the most shocking of all. I have a safety deposit box at First National Bank, downtown branch. Box number 847. The key is taped to the back of this letter. Inside that box, you'll find $1.8 million. Money I've collected over the years from Miller's business dealings. Money that legally belongs to the families of the soldiers who died at Firebase Charlie. Robert flips the letter over with trembling hands. Sure enough, a small brass key is taped to the back page with yellowing tape. I also have documentation proving that Miller Sr. was paid by black market arms dealers to ensure certain operations failed. Your Firebase Charlie mission was sabotaged from the beginning. The North Vietnamese knew exactly when and where to attack because Miller gave them the information. The revelation hits Robert like a physical blow. His brothers didn't just die because backup never came. They were set up, sold out, murdered for profit by the man who was supposed to protect them. The letter's final paragraph burns into Robert's memory. Use this money to honor our fallen brothers, Robert. Use it to destroy the Miller empire that was built on their graves. Charles Miller is dead, but his son Vincent has continued living off blood money. It's time for the debt to be paid. Robert sits in stunned silence for what feels like hours. Cars pass overhead, the same morning traffic that includes Vincent Miller in his Mercedes, probably heading to demolish another piece of history for profit. 3 blocks away, Dorothy Williams sits by her window, watching the overpass through binoculars. She sees Robert reading the letter, sees the moment when understanding hits him like lightning. She's been waiting 55 years for this moment, carrying the burden of her husband's final mission. Her phone rings. The caller ID shows Miller Development. Mrs. Williams? This is Vincent Miller. I understand you're the owner of the old Williams property on Maple Street. Dorothy's blood runs cold. Even after all these years, she recognizes the family resemblance in his voice, the same arrogant tone as his father. What do you want, Mr. Miller? I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 for the property. It's scheduled for demolition next month for a new shopping complex. I know it's not much, but for a property in that condition. Dorothy looks through her binoculars at Robert, who's still clutching the letter like a lifeline. That property isn't for sale, Mr. Miller. Not to you. Not ever. Ma'am, I don't think you understand. The city has already approved the demolition. You can sell to me willingly, or you can lose it through eminent domain for a fraction of the price. Dorothy smiles for the first time in months. Mr. Miller, I don't think you understand. Your family's reign of terror is about to end. She hangs up and continues watching Robert through the binoculars. Under the overpass, Robert Hayes stands up for the first time in 3 years, feeling like a soldier again. The letter has given him something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. His brothers died for Miller's greed. Their families suffered while Miller grew rich, and Vincent Miller has spent his entire life living off blood money. But Captain Williams planned for this day. The evidence is waiting in that safety deposit box. The money is waiting to be returned to its rightful owners. And justice, delayed by 55 years, is finally within reach. Robert folds the letter carefully and puts it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. For the first time since Vietnam, he knows exactly what he has to do. The ghost of Firebase Charlie is about to rise from the dead, and the Miller family's sins are about to come home to roost. As Robert starts walking toward downtown, he doesn't know that Vincent Miller is at that very moment signing papers to demolish the Williams property, the same property where James Williams hid additional evidence of his father's crimes. The collision course has been set for 55 years. Today, it finally reaches its destination. The brass key feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds in Robert's hand as he stands before safety deposit box 847. The bank manager, a nervous man named Wilson, keeps glancing at Robert's torn clothes and weathered appearance. But the key doesn't lie. Box 847 belongs to James Williams, and James Williams left specific instructions. The account holder left a letter stating that only Robert Hayes could access this box, Wilson explains, checking his records for the 3rd time. You'll need to provide identification. Robert pulls out his dog tags, the only identification he's carried for 3 years. Wilson examines them carefully, comparing the name to his records. Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Hayes. The box was paid for in advance through 2025. The lock clicks open, and Robert's breath catches in his throat. Inside the narrow metal box are stacks of documentation, photographs, and bound bundles of cash that seem to go on forever. But it's the manila folder on top that makes his hands shake. The folder is labeled Miller War Crimes Evidence File. Robert opens it with trembling fingers. The first document is a sworn affidavit from Master Sergeant William Rodriguez, dated March 1968. I personally witnessed Lieutenant Charles Miller receive payment from civilian contractor David Brennan in exchange for tactical information about Firebase Charlie operations. The payment was made 3 days before the attack that killed 11 American soldiers. The second document is a bank statement showing deposits into Charles Miller's personal account. $50,000 on March 18, 1968, 3 days after the Firebase Charlie massacre. The deposit slip is signed in Miller's handwriting. But it's the third document that makes Robert's vision blur with rage. A letter from Charles Miller to his son Vincent, written in 1985. The foundation of our family's success was built on difficult wartime decisions. The money that started Miller Development came from sources that must never be questioned. If anyone ever connects our family name to Firebase Charlie, deny everything. The dead can't testify. Robert sinks into the chair Wilson provided, his entire body trembling. Vincent Miller has known the truth his entire life. Every success, every property development, every dollar of profit was built on the graves of Robert's brothers. And Vincent has been throwing coffee at the only survivor every morning, adding insult to murder. The evidence file contains dozens of additional documents. Military communication logs showing Miller's lies to headquarters. Photographs of Miller meeting with known war profiteers. Financial records tracing the stolen money through various accounts before it became the seed capital for Miller Development Corporation. At the bottom of the file is a handwritten note from Captain Williams. Robert, this isn't just about money. It's about justice. Use everything in this box to destroy the Miller empire and honor the memory of our fallen brothers. The cash in this box is Miller money that I've been collecting for decades through legal channels, property deals that went bad for him, business ventures that mysteriously failed. Consider it interest on the debt he's owed for 55 years. Robert counts the money with shaking hands. $1.8 million in small bills, all traceable to Miller Development Corporation through a complex web of failed investments and foreclosed properties. Captain Williams had spent decades slowly bleeding Miller's empire, waiting for the right moment to strike the killing blow. That moment is now. Robert stuffs the evidence and money into a canvas bag Wilson provides, his mind racing with possibilities. But first, he needs to understand the full scope of Miller's current operations. 3 hours later, Robert sits in the Detroit Public Library, using a computer for the first time in years. His search for Miller Development Corporation reveals an empire built on destroyed communities and demolished history. Vincent Miller has torn down dozens of historic buildings, displaced hundreds of families, and turned Detroit's heritage into strip malls and parking lots. But one property stands out from all the rest. The Williams house on Maple Street, scheduled for demolition tomorrow morning. Dorothy Williams' house. The woman who delivered the letter. The wife of Captain James Williams. Robert's blood runs cold as he reads the demolition notice. Miller isn't just destroying a house. He's destroying the last physical connection to the man who exposed his father's crimes. This isn't business. It's personal revenge 50 years in the making. Robert checks the time. 3:47 p.m. The demolition is scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. He has 16 hours to stop Vincent Miller from erasing the final piece of evidence. But as Robert reads deeper into Miller's business dealings, he discovers something that changes everything. Miller Development Corporation is bankrupt. Hidden behind layers of corporate restructuring and creative accounting, Vincent Miller's empire is crumbling. The company owes $12 million to various creditors, and the only thing keeping Miller afloat is a massive development deal with the city, a deal that depends on demolishing the Williams property and 3 surrounding blocks. If the Williams property demolition doesn't happen, the entire development deal collapses. If the development deal collapses, Miller loses everything. Robert understands now why Dorothy refused to sell. She's been protecting more than just her home. She's been protecting the trigger that will destroy the Miller empire. But Vincent Miller isn't giving up without a fight. At exactly 4:15 p.m., 3 men in expensive suits knock on Dorothy Williams' door. Dorothy recognizes the lead man immediately, Vincent Miller, older now than when she last saw him, but still carrying his father's arrogant sneer. Mrs. Williams, I think there's been a misunderstanding about our phone conversation. Dorothy stands in her doorway, blocking their entrance. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Miller. My property isn't for sale. Mrs. Williams, you don't seem to understand the gravity of your situation. This demolition is happening whether you cooperate or not. The city has granted us eminent domain authority. You can take our generous offer, or you can take nothing when the bulldozers arrive tomorrow morning. And you don't seem to understand that your father was a coward and a murderer, and his sins are finally catching up to your family. Vincent's face goes white. What did you just say? I said your father Charles Miller abandoned 11 soldiers to die in Vietnam, so he could steal their death benefits. I said he took blood money from war profiteers and used it to build this company. I said everything you own was bought with the lives of American heroes. Vincent steps closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You old witch, you have no idea what you're talking about. My father was a war hero. Your father was a traitor. And tomorrow morning, the whole world is going to know the truth. Vincent signals to his associates, and they push past Dorothy into her house. Search every room. Find anything that mentions Firebase Charlie, Vietnam, or my father. Burn it all. But they're too late. While Vincent Miller was threatening Dorothy Williams, Robert Hayes was at the offices of Detroit News, Channel 7 News, and the Detroit Free Press, hand-delivering copies of Captain Williams' evidence file to investigative reporters. By 6 p.m., 3 major news outlets are preparing explosive stories about war crimes, stolen money, and a 55-year cover-up. The first story goes live at 11 p.m. Local developer built empire on stolen military funds, documents reveal. Vincent Miller is eating dinner at his country club when his phone starts ringing. Reporters, investors, city officials, federal investigators. By midnight, Miller Development Corporation's stock has crashed, their bank accounts are frozen pending federal investigation, and Vincent Miller is officially bankrupt. But the real surprise comes at 7 a.m., 1 hour before the scheduled demolition. Robert Hayes, wearing a clean suit purchased with Miller's own money, arrives at the demolition site with a team of federal marshals and a court order. The marshals serve Vincent Miller with papers freezing all company assets pending investigation into war crimes and theft of military funds. Vincent Miller, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and accessory after the fact to war crimes committed by your father Charles Miller. Vincent's face turns purple with rage as the handcuffs click into place. This is impossible. That homeless freak has nothing. He's nobody. Robert steps forward, and for the first time in 3 years, Vincent Miller really looks at him. Recognition dawns slowly. The homeless man he's been tormenting is the same soldier his father betrayed 50 years ago. My name is Sergeant Robert Hayes, 1st Infantry Division, Firebase Charlie. Your father left me and 11 brothers to die in Vietnam. He stole the money meant for our families and used it to build your empire. Today, that debt gets paid in full. Vincent's eyes fill with terror as Robert continues. Everything you own, every dollar you've made, every property you've developed, it all came from blood money. And now it's all going back where it belongs. The federal investigation moves with stunning speed. Within 72 hours, prosecutors have enough evidence to seize all Miller Development assets under federal racketeering statutes. The company's $12 million debt becomes the government's problem, while the company's assets, worth over $40 million, are liquidated to pay restitution. But Robert Hayes has bigger plans than simple restitution. Using Captain Williams' strategic planning and his own newfound resources, Robert creates the Firebase Charlie Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping homeless veterans and preserving military history. The foundation's first act is purchasing Miller Development Corporation's assets at federal auction for pennies on the dollar. Dorothy Williams keeps her house, which becomes the foundation's headquarters. The Williams property is converted into transitional housing for homeless veterans, with Dorothy serving as the facility's director. Vincent Miller, stripped of everything he once owned, finds himself sleeping in the same downtown shelter where he once volunteered for photo opportunities during election season. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The man who built his fortune on the graves of soldiers is now dependent on the charity of the very people he once scorned. But Robert Hayes isn't finished with his revenge. On a cold morning in December, exactly 9 months after Dorothy Williams delivered Captain Williams' letter, Robert Hayes pulls up to the downtown shelter in a silver Mercedes, Vincent Miller's former car, purchased at auction. Vincent is standing outside the shelter, holding a cardboard sign that reads "Homeless. Anything helps, please." Robert rolls down his window and looks at the man who once threw coffee at him, who once called him worthless trash, who built his fortune on murdered soldiers. Vincent Miller? Vincent looks up hopefully, not recognizing the clean-shaven man in the expensive car. I'm Robert Hayes. I run the Firebase Charlie Foundation. We help homeless veterans get back on their feet. Vincent's face goes white as recognition hits him. I'm here to offer you a job, Vincent. Minimum wage, part-time, cleaning toilets at our veterans facility. The same facility that sits on your father's war crimes, in the house you tried to demolish. Vincent stares at Robert in disbelief. You see, Vincent, I learned something important during my time on the streets. I learned that everyone deserves a second chance, even the sons of cowards and murderers. Even men who throw coffee at homeless veterans. Even men who live their entire lives off blood money. Robert extends a business card through the car window. The job starts Monday at 6 a.m. Same time your father abandoned my brothers to die. Same time you used to drive past me and throw your garbage at me. Seems fitting, don't you think? Vincent takes the card with shaking hands. Why? After everything I did to you, after everything my family took from you, why would you help me? Robert's answer comes straight from the heart of a soldier who never forgot his duty to serve others, even his enemies. Because Captain Williams taught me that the measure of a man isn't what he does when he has power. It's what he does when he has the chance for revenge. My brothers died so people like you could live free. I'm not going to dishonor their sacrifice by becoming the same kind of monster your father was. Robert drives away, leaving Vincent Miller standing in the snow, holding a minimum wage job offer from the man whose life his family destroyed. 6 months later, Vincent Miller is still cleaning toilets at the Firebase Charlie Foundation Veterans Facility. He lives in a small efficiency apartment, takes the bus to work, and earns just enough to survive. Every day, he works alongside the homeless veterans his father helped create through 50 years of stolen prosperity. And every day, he sees the memorial wall that Robert Hayes built in the facility's main hallway. 11 photographs of young soldiers who died at Firebase Charlie, with a simple inscription. They gave their lives for freedom. We give our lives to honor their sacrifice. Vincent Miller finally understands what his father's betrayal really cost. Not just money, not just property, not just a business empire. It cost the lives of 11 American heroes, and it created decades of suffering for the families left behind. But Robert Hayes proved something more powerful than revenge. He proved that justice delayed is not justice denied. He proved that sometimes the universe keeps perfect accounting, and debts spanning generations eventually come due. And he proved that the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemy, it's showing them a better way to live. The homeless veteran who once slept under a bridge now runs a $50 million foundation. The millionaire who once threw coffee at the homeless now cleans their toilets for minimum wage. Karma doesn't forget. It just waits for the perfect moment to balance the scales. And sometimes, just sometimes, that balance creates something beautiful from something terrible. Redemption from revenge, hope from hatred, and second chances from the ashes of first mistakes. The letter that Dorothy Williams delivered that rainy night didn't just reveal the truth about the past. It rewrote the future for everyone it touched. Justice, it turns out, really is worth waiting for.